So now we're going to turn to budget formats. The textbook covers budget formats to a degree. Mike Sell talks about zero-based budgeting, program budgeting, and performance budgeting, but I wanted to kind of give you a bit more detail about other types of budgeting formats. The slides uh, in this presentation are included in your lesson notes, and I just wanted to kind of give you a context behind those lesson notes so that you can see the examples that I'm talking about and kind of make sense of what's going on. So, the most basic budgeting format would be line item budgeting. Okay. And I always think of line item budgeting as almost a skeleton of every budget because to every degree, every budget will have a line item. You're going to have a an object or an expense category, and then next to that you're going to have the expense or the revenue, whatever the financial type is. So to a degree, every budget will have some sort of line item budget. And again, line item budgeting gives you no detail. It provides very little control or accountability. It just basically tells you that something's going on. And here on the screen, you can see an example of a line item budget. Um, Again, this isn't the standard, but this is just an example that I pulled off of the web a while back. Now, what I have here is a diagram borrowed from the Office of National Drug Control Policy, and they tend to use a performance based budgeting format, if you will. But I put this on the screen here to kind of give you an idea of how they approach performance budgeting. They start with a strategy, and then they get into goals. Then they focus on their objectives. Then they create targets around those objectives, and then they measure those objectives. And here you can see, the kind of the sequence, how this process runs. Here's an example of a program budget, or rather a performance budget. And here you can see over to the right where they have, I'm sorry, over to the left, my left, uh, where they have performance measures, if you will. And then linked to those measures, they have costs, right? And then, well, the performance category, then they have the costs, and then they have the actual measures. Okay, so for example, here they have provide information, referral, and support. Okay, so how are they measuring that? Well, they're measuring that through products, work hours, and then product costs. And so what they're doing is they're measuring work hours by product costs. All right. Uh, Here they have link new slash potential providers to current providers. Okay, how many hours do they expect to work in a given fiscal year to achieve this? So roughly 90.19 hours. Okay, and they're estimating the cost to be $945. Again, these are just examples. This isn't the standard as to how this is to be done, but this is just an example of how some institutions set up their performance budgets. Now we also have planned program budgeting systems. Okay, and this is very similar to performance-based budgeting, but the main difference here is that at the end of the fiscal year, we take the outcomes, right, or the results from the prior year's fiscal year, and we use that to modify or create new programs. Okay, so like performance-based budgeting, program plan budgeting systems basically uses the data, right, to plan for the next fiscal year. Okay, and so really this is all about the data here. Here's an example of a program plan budgeting system, and this could also be used for a performance-based budget. We have the inputs, we have activities tied to those inputs, we have outputs as a result of those activities, and then we have outcomes or impacts. And then we also have management by objectives. Okay, now management by objectives is a results oriented type system. Okay, and the main premise here is that you want to know what can you do for the organization, right? Why should the organization invest in a new resource, invest in a new employee? What exactly is the value that the resource or the employee brings to that organization. And that's what management by objectives really is really all about. And also uh, the funding within the organization basically must be tied directly back to the objectives of that organization. So the objectives start at the top tier portion of the organization, then they trickle down to the management, and then the management trickles down their objectives to the employees and the work product. So everything ties back to that overall organizational objective, which is why they call it management by objectives. So here on the screen you have the departmental objectives, which lead to managerial objectives, which lead to employee objectives, which results in funding. Here we have managers determining the results to be achieved. Managers communicate results, right, through decision packages, and those decision packages will outline various types of funding, and then administrators make funding decisions based upon the results oriented need that ties back to the management objectives. Now, Mike Sell talks about zero-based budgeting. I'm not going to really waste too much time on this since the chapter has a whole section on this. So, but just know that zero-based budgeting basically assumes that you're starting at zero in the previous year and zero from the previous year, and you're having to basically re-justify your whole budget. Um, One thing that I don't think the textbook really covers this is that zero-based budgeting requires the ranking of priorities, and so when you rank your priorities, right, you can present various scenarios that outline how you expect funding to affect your organization. So basically, if you have a three situation scenario where you have uh, reduced funding, current funding, and increased funding, then you can justify the outcomes at all three of those levels. Now, of course, you're going to have to show data to validate why you expect a reduction in funding to affect your service capacity, or why you would expect an increase in funding to affect your service capacity. Finally, we have target-based budgeting. And target-based budgeting basically it gives you an expenditure ceiling. Okay, you have a target that you need to reach, and so as long as your budgetary requests fall within that given target that was given by, say, a budget office or by a comptroller, if you will, as long as your requests fall within that target, there's a good chance that your requests will be prioritized for funding. Okay, but all in all, the whole target in the target-based budgeting component refers to having expenditure ceilings and your requests and your budget not exceeding that ceiling.